We've now covered the history of the TTM and the constructs and given some examples of how the TTM is practically applied. Let's talk now a little bit about the application and the limitations of the TTM. There are a number of implications for interventions. We've talked about a couple throughout this lecture, but one of the implications proposed by the TTM is that we do need to reach more than just those who are ready for the treatment or an intervention. This is often referred to as reactive recruitment. We recruit people that are already seeking treatment, and the breakdown of the stages of change in the TTM just reinforces the fact that there are different levels of readiness in terms of behavior change, and no one level is more important than the other to target. The TTM also underscores the importance for having multiple intervention arms if you have the resources to do so. And again, the reason for this is because not everybody at every stage of change is going to respond to the same intervention. So we want to, if we can, develop different interventions for the different stages. In terms of current use, this principle is often why technology-based communication is often used. And what this means is there's a lot of interventions now that use text messages or mobile apps, and they will do an exercise similar to the one that we did in the previous slides, where they'll ask people, where are you in terms of your stage of change? Are you thinking about changing? Are you not thinking about changing? And then it can automatically provide that person with feedback based on their stage of change. Whereas if you were in person meeting with somebody, and especially if you were meeting with a large group of people and they all had different answers to that question, it's much easier to use technology to instantly give the person a tailored intervention than it is in person, although it's not impossible to do that in person. Finally, the stages of change are really great for participant and practitioner morale, because since it's a continuum, you can mark people's progress across the stages and show them, well, maybe you haven't officially changed your behavior. You can show people, well, you maybe haven't totally changed your behavior, but this is how far you've come. And that's a really good way to keep people motivated, and non-stage theories do not have that tool to their advantage. Finally, ending with the limitations of the TTM, it is very difficult to apply to primary prevention. And primary prevention is preventing somebody from getting sick or adopting an unhealthy behavior before it started. So the question is, how do we keep people at the pre-contemplation stage, or keep people from needing to make a behavior change? Another limitation of the TTM is that it doesn't clearly account for external influences on behavior. So it doesn't have a lot of guidance about what causes people to engage, or causes people engage in unhealthy behavior, or to stay at certain changes. The processes of change talk about how you can change your environment and change your social relationships to help you move through the stages, but it doesn't really talk about how those factors cause people to act unhealthy in the first place or maintain their stage. Stage definitions are also somewhat arbitrary. For example, the pre-contemplation stage, the definition of that is that somebody has no intention of changing within the next 6 months. So that 6-month time frame is kind of arbitrary. The maintenance phase of somebody engaging in a behavior for 6 months or more, that is science-based. We have decades and decades of research saying that if somebody maintains a new behavior for 6 months or more, their chances of relapsing are really slim. But that 6-month period is very dependent on the person and the health behavior. It might not take 6 months for one person or for one behavior, but it might take a year for another behavior. But it still provides some guidance to have these timeframes associated with the stages of change. And then finally, the trans-theoretical model still doesn't totally account for the human factor. There are these processes of change and constructs that should explain or how people can move from stage to stage, But even sometimes when you use those processes of change and you account for the pros and cons and self-efficacy, people still don't change. And that's really the key question in public health is how do we get people to change even when we do everything that we know can be done to have them change? And that's the conclusion of the trans-theoretical model.